And we are rolling in, folks, to discuss The Northman today, my movie review. I watched it yesterday, and I wanted to come to you all and I guess give you all a couple ideas about what the movie's all about. It's great to see those who could show up. We'll get right into it. Grab the mic and swivel around here to look at one of these articles and start off with reading a little bit of an article or two, and then we'll talk about briefly maybe some of the some ideas within the frame of this movie, and then we'll get into my interpretation or my views, my review specifically, and MPs, mean pathogens, anti-white ideas that I noticed. The Northman is the brutally, slyly subversive Viking movie you didn't know you needed, says, what's this magazine? Mel Magazine? Is that right? The director of The Witch and The Lighthouse has delivered an historical action epic that's visceral and thoughtful and also a little nerdy all at once. Can everybody hear me okay? Let me know. Yes, we have the old mic back up here. Dino Storm, good to see you. The Northman, Robert Eggers' intense, often visionary Viking epic. The characters yell a lot, he says, in The Northman. Actually, yelling doesn't come close to describing the wrenching sound that emanates from the men in this movie. Horrible wails of anguish, booming screams that seem ready to rip open their insides, shouting that could shake the nearby mountains. It's hard to imagine any Hollywood film this year that will be as primal, even feral, as this one. Oh, there's Ladybug. Thank you so much. She says, I can hear okay. Good sound. The Iberian writer. Great to see you. MH says, I hear ya. Thank you so much, folks, for the feedback there. Eggers' superb previous two movies, yada, 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 drove deep into period detail, drawing on bygone dialects and arcane historical accuracy to tell the stories that felt like cursed time capsules, dug up and then unleashed upon the modern world. Can you all hear the AC unit in the background? With this mic, I don't know. The Northman, which opens April 22nd, that's today, of course, but you could see it yesterday, depending on where you were. The acclaimed director takes us to the 10th century, mixing the realistic and the fantastical, combining the thrilling and the delightful overwrought. Eggers has said he wanted to, quote, to try and make the Viking movie, the definitive Viking movie. He has certainly made the most Viking movie. From its striking opening image, an erupting volcano, the sky charcoal gray, and an ominous voice rumbling to the soundtrack, the Northman makes it plain that it is not messing around. Divided into chapters, the film takes us into the world of Amleth, a young prince whose father and mother, it's either Orvindil or Arvindil, and Queen Gudrun rule a flourishing kingdom, don't they? Arvindil is a noble warrior, but he knows that he must prepare his boy to take the throne. So the protagonist, of course, is Amleth. Unaware that treachery is just around the corner, so he's unaware that treachery is just around the corner. Enter Orvindil's scheming brother, Fjolnir, whose men murder the king. In short order, Fjolnir seizes the crown and Arvindil's bride, Gudrun, as his own, ordering that Amleth be hunted down and killed as well. But the young man escapes, swearing vengeance and promising one day to rescue his poor mother. It's a stunning opening, establishing Eggers' continued fascination with mythic pasts. There's a coarse beauty to the visuals, a feeling that every frame has been soaked in blood and mud. And the characters speak in Old Icelandic. Whether or not you follow every exchange is of no concern to Eggers or his characters. Edgar's obsessive studiousness regarding his forgotten world has always been utterly enthralling and also enjoyably nerdy. The work of a straight A student who also wants to make sure he gets extra credit points too. Consequently, and enveloping as the Northman's stern brutality is, there's also something a touch of ridiculous about this tale of savage warriors on grim quests. The movie is so solemn that it can almost be funny at times. Edgar's laboring so magnificently create a gritty, believable Viking drama that he risks obscuring about how much fun he's clearly having. But just when you think the Northman is a bit overblown, he knocks you sideways with another extraordinarily staged sequence. Eggers may take all this a tad too seriously, but like the on screen Vikings pillaging and ransacking with utter ferocity, the Northman destroys everything in its path, including whatever objections you might have. After witnessing Amleth's harrowing escape, we cut to about 20 years later. The young prince is now a young man, a mighty king who's an expert with a sword, slaying his enemies while letting out an ear splitting bellow. Determined to uphold his pledge from childhood, Amleth disguises himself as a slave so he can infiltrate Uncle Fjolnir's meager farm. As we will learn, the kingdom that Fjolnir claimed didn't last. When Amleth arrives, he's put to work, Fjolnir not recognizing his nephew, and neither does Gudrun. And so Amleth waits for the right moment to hit back at his uncle, befriending a bewitching fellow slave, Olga, who offers her help. Olga. The Norse legends that Eggers and the co-writer Sion plunder for inspiration predate Hamlet, although for most audiences that will be the most obvious touchstone. And although there's also a little gladiator to this slow burn revenge saga as well. On its surface, the Northman's narrative is fairly familiar, which is why Edgar's emphasis on period specifics, including that era's belief in the supernatural, is so crucial. We recognize the contours of Amleth's quest, but it's all the little details that make the film so absorbing. Within such a framework, the occasional digressions into mysticism and witchcraft don't actually play like digressions. The surreal and the earthly coexists in the Northman, creating an enrapturing middle ground between the physical and fantasy realms. Much like last year's comparably otherworldly The Green Knight, the Northman gives the past where were we? Pre, uh, presentness, sorry. In the midst of battle, Edgar's camera roams across the landscape, immersing us in the carnage, making us feel the terror and exhilaration of a violent time. And as a result, the depictions of misogyny, of course, we're going to have anti-white writers because there is nothing other than that in the establishment. And that's just the way it goes, folks. And barbarism are all in the more gripping. Eggers doesn't glorify these Vikings' primitive mindset or their bloodlust. And yet, it's hard to deny the Northman's bracing lizard brain purity. The film is a complex, gorgeously crafted study of a crippling patriarchal superstitious society. And if you want to see parallels between then and now, Eggers won't dissuade you, but also it's a rousing guy movie about righteous, a buff, righteous dude who's going to kill his no good uncle. The balance of spectacle and nuance may throw viewers who just want to see a lot of swordplay mixed with gnarly decapitations. Doesn't everybody want to just see that? Not me exactly, but it's a testament to Edgar's growing skill as a filmmaker that he doesn't eschew any of this genre's visceral sensations while ensuring the story's historical accuracy somewhat. The character's disturbingly feral screams speak to the Northman's unglamorous depiction of an uncivilized age, not prompting the audience to romanticize a time when men were men, but instead asking us to see our species in its untamed form. You'll both recoil and be riveted by the brute force simplicity of Amleth's plan, with its echoes of so many earlier revenge tales. I wouldn't say Skarsgård, the actor playing Amleth, is particularly subtle in the role, but subtlety isn't required. As Amleth, he seems carved out of stone, a perfect weapon of destruction, who has steeled himself for this moment. He's as obvious and inevitable as an oncoming storm, and just as likely to wreak havoc. The Northman throws in twists and turns, trying to subvert the traditional hero's journey in much the same way that the Green Knight did. At their core, both of these utterly arresting films evoke the folkloric to lay bare men's essential nature, examining how ancient beliefs about bravery and nobility are as fabricated as the magical spirits who populate those stories, writes this anti-white POS. But Eggers isn't above the inherent pleasures of Viking movies, although his graphic action scenes have a bone crushing intimacy that never lets us forget how intense and ugly it is to kill another person at close range. The Northman is hardly the first revenge film to critique our desire for revenge, but by capturing the genre's grisly allure, Eggers has given us a movie for the gut and the brain. And Skarsgård embodies that duality. He possesses a godlike form. He would have made a fine Thor. But as an actor, he's often conveyed a soulfulness beneath his character's rough exterior. Ultimately, Amleth doesn't necessarily see the futility of his quest, but he nonetheless changes along the way, or at least he tries. The Northman takes us back to an irretrievable past, but it has no illusions about its heroes and villains. All they know is how to kill and to conquer. Robert Eggers shows us what's so strong about such a simple worldview and also so pointless. Types fruitlessly Tim Grierson. We also have over here from Vanity Fair just a tidbit, and we're going to get right into the story itself, and also be aware that there are spoiler alerts here. There are. I've just read an article. I haven't even given you my take yet. So I will continue with this just a bit from this article. We'll get into the story itself and some interpretations of world inside the story, and then my actual opinions and mean pathogens. Forget Hamlet. Times such as these call for a hero more assertive than a melancholy Dane. This is on Vanity Fair. Thus, writer-director Robert Eggers has reached further back into literary history to find Amleth, the old prince of Germanic and Norse myth, who inspired Shakespeare's most famous and enduring play. Eggers' new film, The Northman, trades the courtly, clever intrigues of Shakespeare's day for the blood and mud and fire of Amleth's Viking age. This is a natural step for Eggers. His past two films, 2015's Puritan horror tale, The Witch, and 2019's Cabin Fever, two-handed The Lighthouse, the Lighthouse, are also about the brutality of yesteryear. These eras are often cozily or nobly mythologized. Eggers takes pains to tell us that they were reliably awful. There has never been so rosy a view of first millennium Ireland and Iceland, but the hit show Vikings has in recent years at, at least put all that clang and conquest in grand historical context. The Northman, in contrast, keeps things squalid and faintly silly, even when it whips up a magnificent holy fervor. The film is a simple story of revenge. Amleth seeks to destroy his uncle, Fjolnir, who has killed Amleth's father and taken Amleth's mother, Gudrun, for his wife. To do that, Amleth must make himself scarce for a number of years, raiding Rus settlements throughout northern Europe with a band of reavers, waiting for time and fate to reveal his opportunity to strike. When that moment does arrive, Amleth voluntarily enslaves himself and gets shipped off to a barren, dreaded Iceland, where Fjolnir rules over a petty little fiefdom, chased out of the land he violently overtook decades prior. Just as in Hamlet, the supernatural comes to bear on the Northmen. So why don't we go ahead, and it's top of the hour. It is 3. Where are you in the world? And have you seen the movie yet? And I guess certainly when we're done, I want to hear your views in the thread below about what you thought about the movie or whether or not you're going to go watch it. And essentially, what happens in this movie is, and as you've seen from these articles, and let me pull up this other document I have because I was rushing and didn't have time for that. But essentially, the movie starts off with Amleth as a boy, and he's in his father's kingdom, which of course is Orvendil or Arvendil. Warraven is that guy's name. And that actor is Ethan Hawke playing that role. And Ethan Hawke got to meet me, and maybe I will tell you all about how that happened toward the end here. If you're interested, you can let me know. And so Orvendil is returning to the kingdom after raiding somewhere like this. And don't think kingdom as in Lord of the Rings or this sort of thing. Think like dirty, fetid, little miserable wooden structure, mud everywhere. I'll get to more of like that. I just tell the story first. I guess try to stay on track. But the king comes back, and the king is wounded, and it may be grievous, but he's concerned about that. So he wants his son to be, I guess, brought into the process of being king, the next king, and so they go through that process. And remember, their spoiler alert in a big way. I'm going to be sharing things from the movie. I might not give away the big twist. There's a big twist toward the end. I might not give that away, so we'll see. Although I might, I don't know. So anyhow, returns to the he returns to the kingdom. He's wounded, and but he's in good spirits. His brother shows up, Fjolnir, and to celebrate, I guess, his return. And after this process, this over the course of the night, it seems, with his son Amleth, he he comes out of this ceremony. It's like dawn or something, and that's where the king is attacked. And really, this is the story of Hamlet, but I won't give my opinions yet. But so the king is attacked, and he is killed by his brother and the men loyal to his brother. They try to kill Amleth. He runs off, and he is, although he grievously injures in a comical way one of the men loyal to Fjolnir, and he escapes. They then flash. The movie has it is broken like into chapters. It goes to a black screen, and then written in is that I guess it's runes, and then they translate it into English underneath. 20 years later, and he's now a man. And Skarsgård, I guess, the actor who's playing him as a man, and he's in this troop of I guess Vikings, and they have these they show a couple ceremonies of around fires, and again I'll get to more of the detail of the cinematography and when I give my opinion. But I want to get to the people who have the shortest attention spans first. So for those who are like hamsters and gerbils, just hold on, we're almost there. And so they show in the movie him going on these raids and against I guess other towns, if you will. He's not a part of like a kingdom. It seems like it's a thief band or something of this nature. He discovers that slaves that they capture, people that they capture and they make slaves, and believe it or not, they're not black. So I don't know how that happens, but you would think that if they're going to have slaves, even though they're as far north as you can go and survive, that they would all be black, because that's what we're taught, at least here in America. But they're not. They're actually white. And so he finds out they're getting shipped off to this Uncle Fjolnir, who's now, the king, shipped off to his kingdom, which is really a fiefdom. He's been thrown out by what was it, the king from Norway, and from where his kingdom was, and sort of exiled to this Iceland, and so it's much smaller now. The land can't support many people. So Amleth decides that he's going to pretend to be a slave. He gives himself a slave brand. He puts on their clothing. He gets on sneaks onto one of the slave ships, and he's carted off to Iceland. He is, and I'm going to give more details when I go back through it with my opinion, but he's bought by Fjolnir and some other slaves are as well. A female, Olga, she's a witch. She's got magic, and but not kind of in the way that you've seen magic in other movies. And anyhow, so she's also purchased, and then he remains there through these sort of ups and downs, these vicissitudes of getting closer to avenging himself and his family, and then falling away, and Fjolnir and his guys having the upper hand, fate sort of in a way having the upper hand, and then eventually it gets to the point where it's known. He has some of the other Olga, the other slave. They work together against this kingdom, and then at the very end, he gets to have a fight it out with his awful uncle, and that's the story. That's the story. Then there's a big twist near the end, and if you don't want to know what that is, then I'll tell you again. I'm about to mention the twist. It'll be later though in this live stream, this review. But then let folks know that we're reviewing this as well while we're here, and then please share it afterward. But what I wanted to do first, and when you're looking at this movie, you're looking at the actions of the characters. Why did they do the things they do? Well, of course, we know in the practice of going free, they do things they do because the scripts tell them to. But we can also think about, and I think I'll just pepper this in. We can also think about uh, if these things were real, then how would you respond? What might motivate an Amleth to behave the way that he behaved, or how possible or impossible are these sorts of events and things in the real world? And you all can chime in. You can tag me. We got Entropy is up and running, and I'll keep an eye on Cash App too, just in case anybody wants to have something absolutely unquestionably read or a question addressed while we are live. That's the easiest way to do it. And of course, we have over here, we have Odyssey up and running. A big hello to everybody on Odyssey and D Live and everywhere with Rumble where you might be watching. So I guess I'm going to take a step back and talk about the movie as I saw it. So first of all, this is essentially Hamlet, except of course Shakespeare was one of our most unparalleled geniuses, and Eggers is seemingly a retardus. I mean, come on, seriously, Shakespeare, right? How do you watch? How do you watch? And when I first heard the description of this, I was like, wait a second, I think this is Shakespeare. First heard the description of this movie. It wasn't in these articles. But I was reading the description. I said, this sounds like Shakespeare. In fact, this sounds like Hamlet. I don't know if you all know or not, but looking at the name Amleth, I see Hamlet. So Shakespeare was pretty damn smart. I bet there are more little hidden pieces throughout Hamlet. But I have to say that I prefer Shakespeare any day, especially Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to cast one's fate against a sea of sorrows, and by opposing, end them. That is pure beauty, genius. What you find in The Northman is garbage. The writing of the movie is garbage. The cinematography is uh, B-movie cinematography. The clothing of the characters, the costumes, I thought was not much better than you could see at a Renaissance festival. But the acting, garbage. So you're getting it right up front. You're getting it right up front. What happens in this movie? I wrote some notes. Starts off with a beautiful scene, a gripping scene, as they mentioned in this article, of this beautiful volcano. And there is this, it is erupting, and there is this man's voice, I guess, speaking of the prophecy of this Amleth or something of this nature. Much of it, at least for me, was difficult to understand. In part because the writing was garbage, so that the constructions and the thoughts that you expected to follow didn't follow, at least that I expected to follow. Uh, at times, they were also kind of mumbling. They weren't exactly um, they weren't exactly, I don't know, projecting, and I guess maybe that would have been intentional. But it made it difficult. It also maybe I was writing some notes while there as well, so that probably interfered. And but nonetheless, this is how it opens, and then it then moves to a model of a city up on a rocky outcropping, and that is the kingdom of Orvendil or Orvendil, and they are waiting. a child who is Amleth is waiting for his father to return, and then he sees them in the distance, and of course the child is very excited. Father returning home after another campaign, and thank God he's still alive. Kind of a mood. The king comes back, and very typical. There's a celebration, but this is not. Be prepared for pitch black almost the entire time. This movie is dark, and in part, movie makers do that because they don't want to pay for the actual set, and they don't want to pay for the computer animation after the fact. So if you just make everything dark, then nobody can tell that you didn't pay for a quality set and you didn't pay for all of the after effects to be done. So it's a way, I guess, to do it on the cheap, but that's what you see with a lot of B movies. So there are a couple of, I guess, over the course of the movie, there are a couple scenes that are powerful visually, or maybe not even go, are nearly powerful visually, but the vast majority of it is low budget, done in the dark, and that's how this is. And when the king comes back, you have these really, when you have this low budget, you always have these really tight quarters in movies. So you like have all of the actors kind of huddled around, a camera aiming in between some of them or two of them. And that's what it was. The king comes back, and he's like, it's this little huddle of a place. So it's, if you're looking for, when you hear king, when you hear kingdom, if you're looking for something a little bit more impressive, then forget about it. You're not going to find it here. If you want to see something, I mean, really, ultimately, this movie was like something the History Channel could have filmed for one of its documentaries, as far as visuals. So, hour-long documentary, that's visually what you get from like the History Channel for this movie. They show them bringing in the slaves, but they don't show, as the king comes back, you get this very Arvindale, the movie maker, and I want you to be aware that on this the magic window behind me, you will see what will appear is the historian that was hired for, I think, from Oxford for this. And what was that bitch's name? I have her name here somewhere. Her name is Johanna Friedrichs-Dutier. Johanna Friedrichs-Dutier. And she's known for a book. She's author of the book Valkyrie, The Women of the Viking World. So what do you think? Anti-white? Yeah. And she actually begged for a particular scene to be in this movie, and I'll tell you what it is. So typical of these radical female anti-whites as well. So you get this, the movie maker conveys to you what exactly Orvindil is all about. Because as he comes back, he is accompanied by this chain gang by the throat of women. There's no male slaves when it comes to King Arvindale, only the raping of women. So it's just this train of females. So this guy is some sort of pervert that they immediately communicate to you. They don't show food that's brought back. They don't show animals that are brought back. They don't show jewelry, if there was any to take, coinage, precious metals, any of that to take. No. King Orvindale only brings back whores, or women's going to make into whores. So you really get an impression about this guy that he's some kind of sick sex pervert right from the start. Takes nothing from the towns that he destroys except for their women. And of course, he's met there. His brother is there. The queen Gudrun is there, and a lot more to say about her. coming up. The brother is also, and I guess I'll mention that a little bit later. They do mention right at the beginning, near the beginning as well, that uh, the son Amleth he might have very well have to take the throne at a very young age, and the king Arvindil says that's fine. My grandfather took the throne at his age, so it's and he says he had to kill his uncle to get the throne. And they say these things like they're kind of this like maybe this circular idea that you the circular idea of history, which is total bullshit. Do not, in my opinion, I mean, go ahead if you want to believe in this circular wheel of history thing. Okay, that's for you. I don't believe in it because I don't see any evidence for it, and more importantly, I see people using that belief to do nothing in the here and now. Fate controls. There is no fate. You make up your own fate. And the white race is diminishing now, but hey, that wheel will keep turning, and then no, it won't. We can absolutely be biologically white erased. So it sort of is like a nod in the direction of, well, my grandfather had to kill his uncle to get the throne, and so my son might have to do the same. It's not. I don't know if they're trying. They might also, be trying to convey some sort of I guess, this prophetic nature, but it's only going to work, I think, for people who aren't. Or it's only going to be interesting for people who aren't terribly astute. Like a rabbit getting pulled out of the hat by a magician, a dullard would be really amazed. But anyone else would say, well, that's why the table has a tablecloth over it. Now, it's really, it's also the movie is very gross on many levels. When when Orvindil takes Amleth down into this mound, they go down into a mound, and there's a man down there. I guess he's some sort of a witch doctor, and he has too few clothes on, and you really wish that he was clothed. Everybody is fully clothed. Everybody is filthy the entire time. I don't know where do you get where does I mean the whole thing's got to be so anti-white. Whenever movie makers depict non-white people from however many hundreds or thousands of years ago, they are beautifully adorned in like paints and feathers and pelts. But when they depict white people, they're filthy. They are just top to bottom filth. Like white people, we just never bathe. I mean, it's just okay. I get it. We probably got dirty often, but I'm sure the white people bathe occasionally. But no, not according to movie makers. They never bathed. They were just filthy. The only time they were clean was, at least didn't have dirt on them, was when they popped out. And after that, it was eternity of dirt because they were going to get buried in it too. Now, they go down into this, and the witch doctor man is filthy, and the king is filthy, and the son is filthy, and the king demands, or not the king, but the king tells his son, you got to do like I do. So he gets on all fours and starts barking. And so the son has to get on all fours and bark and howl. And they go before this witch doctor guy underground, where they have a fire going, but somehow they're not suffocating from it. But they go underground, and they the witch doctor guy is saying, and again, the guy really, you would want him to have more clothes on, really gross, and not a fine specimen of our race. And there's another one like that too a little later. But he says, how do I know that you're not a dog uh, rather than a wolf? How do I know the difference? And so he brings over like trays of like entrails for them to eat out of, like they are a dog or a wolf. And he And the king is on all fours with his face in it, eating it, and the boy is on all fours with his face in it, eating it. Really disgusting. And the witch doctor comes up and says to the king, "How do I know?" Gets right in his face. "How do I know that you're not a dog?" And then the king musters up a belch in response. And that seems to satisfy the witch doctor. So really a nice depiction. He then moves over to the Amleth, the prince, and he said, "How do I know that you are not a dog?" And then Amleth musters up a fart. I kid you not. So this is how white people assumed this was like the degree to which, I mean, talk about mean pathogens. As I'm telling the story, see if you can't name them as you go along. Talk about, like we used to have, when we were writing our own stories, you used to pull a rock from a stone. Now you fart while you eat entrails. This is what they've made of the white race in movies. So by the way, I'll just go ahead and tell you right now, if you're pagan and you've seen the reviews and you think this is really going to be something special for you, think again. It's not. It's not. I can't imagine anybody being proud of our pagan history and watching this and being proud as a result, saying, yeah, that's telling the story as it makes sense and as it conveys its true meaning to us. They're told right in the very beginning. They make sure with these little lines you see, and I please don't. These might be slightly paraphrased because again, there was a lot of mumbling. There was a lot of the writing was garbage. So, and I was taking notes. But this, if not a perfect quote, then very nearly in paraphrase. Then the son is told to respect the the mystical powers of women. So, and you see this theme recur in the movie that women have a magical connection to gods that men don't have. So, males then are reduced in this view to mere beasts of burden. You build, you die in war, you maintain farms, you build the fort, you build the house or whatever, you maintain, you're just a beast of burden. And if you die, so what? These these females who have some kind of connection to gods that you don't have, then so that they can live on and they can, I guess they're the true leaders ultimately. They're also said here, and this might be a perfect quote: "Women know the destinies of men." So think about the power then. I mean, how much more power do white women need to be given in the Western household? They are in complete control. Women know your destiny. Presumably, then, there is some power over that destiny. So, right after this ceremony, this disgusting little ceremony, so that Amleth is prepared to be king, and the father reveals to his son during this ceremony, takes his bandages off, and you can see this grievous wound, and he's actually bleeding from it. And he has his son put his hand on it. When his son puts his hand on the wound, oh, and there's also I guess a couple points that I think people who will want to get down into the weeds, they'll wax on about, and a lot of people will be very interested in for no reason whatsoever. But like, there's the point where when the son sees the wound, he sheds a tear, and he sheds a tear, and the witch doctor says, "That'll be the last tear that you'll ever shed." And he like grabs and it kind of looks like a little diamond or a little stone of some type, and then like gives it to him. And so, and that's it for Amleth's tears. He doesn't cry again, and except later in the movie, it might be a little bit of moistening, but I'll get to that. So then the son touches the wound, and then he sees this tree of life thing. What is that called again? The pagan. I almost just had it. It's got kind of a weird name. So he sort of sees this, and he can see like roots, and it actually looks like, and branches, and it actually looks like people are on the branches, and what it's meant to be is that these are the the connections of kin and all, and it is almost looks like the people are hanging. Like you could confuse it being um, yeah, Yggdrasil. That's it, Jilly. Thank you. So, or yeah, probably not pronouncing it right, but um, he sees that when he touches. So it's kind of like a vision he gets. They leave this ceremonial pit. I'll get out of the way so you can see that shot. Look at that beauty right there, anti-white. And then look at here, the Valkyrie. That's from the movie. You can see that its teeth were messed up, but fortunately, they have a good dental plan because they have sharp braces all the way across, pulling it all together. Um, I guess Odin couldn't do anything about the teeth. So when they leave this mound, this ritual mound, uh, the king is instantly struck with this is Arvindil or Orvindil is instantly struck with arrows, and he pulls his sword out to do battle. And I don't know, guy rides up on a horse, and it's really I'm gonna really upset a bunch of guys. The battle scenes, the choreography is pure shit. It is awful. If you think that you're going to get this like awesome fight scenes and anything, for example, even approximating Lord of the Rings, forget about it. There isn't any. It's garbage. There are these big moments where there are the pauses, not like intentional for some sort of artistic reason, like maybe Lord of the Rings, where they would pause things and then spin the camera around and then the fight would continue. No, 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 no. Nowhere close to the Matrix or anything like that. No, it's just people who had learned, okay, when I swing like this, then you block, then I swing like that, and then you throw me. So they do the block and then they go to swing and the guy waits to be grabbed and thrown. I mean, terrible, terrible. I was moaning in the movie theater, and it wasn't for the usual positive reasons. So it was dreadful. Don't look for that. So they ride up on the horse, and the king like gives one like really just pathetic or so sword taps like kids, like touching swords, and then he goes to his knees, and the brother, all of these guys have masks on. The brother comes up, he's got a mask, he takes the mask off. It's revealed that it's the brother. Big surprise, never saw that one coming. And the king, of course, curses him, calls him a half-breed, and curses him. So at that point, the king has to die because he's really broken anti-white morality, calling his brother, I guess his half-brother, a half-breed. And the thing that's happening there is that they've got to do something, the movie maker, because the king is a bit lighter featured. The brother is very dark featured, and so you've got to make the king worthy of of being killed at that moment, and make the brother a good guy in that moment to some degree for an anti-white audience, which is all of us, with the exception of those going free. So the brother, uh, he curses, the king curses him, and he says his kingdom is going to go to ruin for stealing the crown this way. And then the brother goes ahead and kills him. This is Fjolnir killing Arvindil, and it's Yggdrasil, I guess is the proper pronunciation. Thank you. And so then I say the Amleth, the son, runs off. He's very young. these men loyal to Fjolnir run after him. One catches him, and the this Amleth cuts his nose off. Like he's on top of him and he's holding him and he says, "I'm going to, XYZ." And somehow the boy gets a knife loose and cuts the tip of his nose off, and it's pretty damn gruesome looking. And then the boy runs off, and that's the end of that. Then it's 20 years later. You see this like black screen. I mean, it looks like the kind of thing. This movie is the kind of thing that you could easily find a YouTuber making, and it would be a YouTuber with a very several $1,000 budget, maybe $10,000, $20,000 budget, could make this movie, and with the exception of paying the actors, obviously. And so, uh, 20 years later, and suddenly you see Amleth. He's a man. He's this actor who's been working out and preparing for the part, and he's in some kind of a Viking band. Again, filthy mud. They flash to the scene of a fire, and these guys are doing the worst dance around a fire you had ever imagined. It's like they found the white people that actually don't have any rhythm whatsoever. Like they couldn't find any white people with rhythm. They had to find these white guys and just perpetuate the stereotype, the meme pathogen, that white people can't dance because these poor souls couldn't dance for shit. And if they're not going to be dancing, then they shouldn't really be, or dancing well, then I guess they shouldn't be showing any dance. And by I mean dancing well, I don't mean like there's a choreographed dance, or they are like shuck and jiving or whatever it is. But I mean, if you have drums going, you can either have rhythm or not. You gotta be with, and your body's like moving with like, look at me. Wow, I have rhythm. I'm white. White people have rhythm, but they found white people without rhythm and they put them around this fire. And then there's this very weird chant, and it's in maybe Icelandic, and they're writing English on the screen, and they're saying that they will it's all about killing. Like the whole life is about nothing but murdering people. It's just murder and drink their blood. That you'll have no problem drinking their blood, and you're a wolf and you drink their blood. And just macabre and oh, by the way, I have to say this: when the son Amleth, after he escapes the Fjolnir's men, he runs back to the village where the kingdom where a lot of those loyal to Arvindil have been murdered, and the queen is being carried off, like wrapped up in a sheet or something, and like screaming, and she's carried off, and then Amleth escapes to the queen is not non-white. The queen is a white woman. What's the woman's name who plays it? Nicole Kidman. And so he runs off. He gets in a boat and he starts like rowing away, and he's crying, of course. I think the best actor in the whole movie might have been that little boy. Everyone else was pretty damn awful. I mean, just awful. It was unbelievable. So including this Kidman, who is she kidding with her performance? It was lousy. So the kid rows off, but he's chanting to himself. He's saying, I will avenge you, father. I will save you, mother. I will kill you, Fjolnir. He says it again and again. I will avenge you, father. I will save you, mother. I will kill you, Fjolnir. And I liked it better. I liked it a lot better when it was, hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. I liked it much better when it was that, because this was like a god awful. Nobody should do that in movies ever again, because it can't get better than The Princess Bride. So anyhow, back to this later in life. And so after this like ceremony, and then they all fall to the ground at the same time. It's very weird. All these grown men, and then they go to this village. The next scene is them like sneaking up, and they have wolf skins over their back, and they're like crawling in this like low shrubbery, and as though they're going to be camoed by the wolf skin. I mean, it was just, is that what they did? I mean, I thought they were much more like, they would like show up at the top of a hill and say, "Here we are, motherfuckers. We're here to finish you off." I didn't know that they snuck up with camo of wolf skin. Maybe though. And so then the guys in the fort, or this like town, it has a wood fence around it, and they see him. One of them throws a spear, and it like a javelin. It goes through the air, and then Amleth. Nobody knows he's had been the prince. Nobody cares. This band of Vikings or whatever it is, they had just adopted him when he was a pup. They say he stands up and he catches the spear. It looks completely fake because it is, but I mean, it looks really fake. He turns around and throws the spear back, and of course, it hits the guy who threw the spear originally. And then he and the other guys, they throw off their wolf skins and they go running the most pathetic trot, because it's down like a little slope, and I guess the actors didn't want to fall, and so they're all like very carefully picking their steps on their way down. I was just like, what are you doing? Why are you bothering? You're like trotting toward this, and then they impossibly climb these vertical tree trunks that have been made with an axe, and like a hand axe, a hatchet. And then what is the other hand grabbing and the feet grabbing? They don't show you because there's nothing there to grab. But somehow they go up, and he gets over the side. Do not think battle like Lord of the Rings. Do not think battle like anything else you've ever seen. This is tight shots because low budget, I guess. Or or maybe they had to spend money elsewhere just on getting the actors. So you don't get this sense of this big battle taking place. You kind of get a sense that maybe 20 guys or 15 guys or so are fighting maybe just beyond the edges of the camera, but you're like zoomed in on some really horribly choreographed fight between like maybe like two guys. And there's a lot of screaming though, a lot of women running around, and it ends up being very strange. It's just, instead of showing these great fight scenes, you see a lot of scenes of men grabbing women to take them off to rape them, grabbing little children to do what with them, I don't know. But you do see something a little bit later in this scene here. So Amleth gets over the side. He knocks a guy off of a horse, and by jumping down, and then hits that guy with a hatchet, and that's the end of him. And then stands up, and it's like slow. It's really like this weird slow interpretation of hand-to-hand combat, and then it's suddenly over. And they're like washing blood off themselves, and there's this big thatched roof hut thing where you see them ushering, and they're making sure that you see children, like babies like this tall, making sure you see them, and I guess women they didn't want being ushered into, but it's almost entirely children ushered into this big building with the thatched roof and of course the wood walls, and they are snatching women for raping, and some of the women are like they show them like come up with trying to offer bread or something, and then they stab one of the guys, and then they kill that woman. They take all of these kids and some women, and they put them in of the whole town, and they put them in this building, and then they set it on fire and cook them all alive. I don't know if that's what was really done, but I know you wouldn't see that in a depiction of a non-white race from so many years ago. So they then go. Amleth then is visited by this uh, this witch magical creature thing, and you see her come up on the screen here, and she's got like a crown of wheat or something like this. Not this one, the Valkyrie with the braces, but the thing doesn't tell him, well, this is totally immoral. You shouldn't behave this way. You shouldn't be cooking all of the children of another town and raping all the women and what have you. It No, she just reminds him that he's good. That's the thing right there that talks to him. Reminds him that and that men took her eyes, cut her eyes out, but she can still see them, and it just so more anti-male, anti-masculinity, mean pathogens. They then uh, reminds him of that. So then they flash to another scene. He's back like in maybe their campsite of his Viking group, and they are packaging up all of the slaves for sale and rape. And then uh, he decides that's when he's going to pretend to be a slave, because he finds out that Fjolnir is going to be buying slaves out in Iceland, and he burns himself with a slave mark. He changes his clothing. All of these things are, by the way, nothing is given you to make this the least bit realistic. Like, how did he get the clothes, for example, to pretend to be a slave? And just a lot is skipped over. It's over a 2-hour movie, so you think they could have found some of these things. It's also an incredibly slow movie. If you're a guy, you want to see some fast-paced action, forget about it. You're not getting it from the Northman. There is no fast-paced action. It is it's slow like movies made for women. That's how slow it is. The one writer I read there said slow burn. No, it is like a slow piss stream. It's like you have prostate problems big time, and engorged prostate, and you better get right to the doctor because it could be cancer. Your piss is just drizzling out of you. That's how slow it is. So he then has to get, even though he's known these band of guys since he was a child, somehow he's able to trick them into thinking that he's a slave to be carted off. He actually gets in the water, swims out to the slave ship, which is one of those Viking ships. No one sees him climb over the edge and into the boat. Uh, that's how he does it, and that's where he meets Olga, this magical woman, another magical woman, and that's the Queen Gudrun right there. Meets this magical woman. She's chained up, and they're both carted off to, and that's where she tells him that your clothes don't conceal who you really are. So that's how I can tell that you're not actually a slave, like she is. But she wasn't a slave either. She was now taken for slavery. But she told him that you have to behave like a sheep if you're going to not get noticed. I would also hope that all of the guys you've been hanging out with for the past 20 years get amnesia, so they don't know who you are. They're then carted off to Iceland. They come to King Gudrun, his tiny, tiny, tiny kingdom, and with Queen Gudrun, and they have 2 sons, an older, maybe a 20 or some year old, and then maybe a 9-year-old or so, or nearly 20 maybe. And the king decides he doesn't want them, any of the slaves, because he doesn't think. I do want to remember, because I have a note here. When the prince Amleth meets with that thing right there, the witch thing, she says something to him that I'm not 100% sure I understand. They show it again at the end. It appears that she actually uses the phrase maiden king, that Amleth is intended to to set the prophecy in motion or what have you of the maiden king. So a female king, which is supposed to be of his line, that comes at some later point. So another another part of the anti-white narrative, that we're supposed to be ruled. Not only do the women have magical powers, contact with the gods, and magical powers on Earth, uh, they also, and there's also the implication in the movie that they're also more intelligent, more cunning than men. But now Amleth is setting the groundwork for a female to be king as well, so that we can just get right to gynocentric rule in every area of life. So they get to Fjolnir's kingdom, and uh, they he decides he doesn't want any of the slaves because he thinks they won't survive the winter. Amleth then just kills another slave with his bare hands right in front of this king. The king decides, okay, well, I'll have that one, and because he looks healthy enough. They do this. They make this effort I thought was really ridiculous, where the slaver shows the king the teeth of Amleth, and of course he's got perfect teeth. I mean, he's a modern day actor. I guess that's not true for all of them, but nonetheless, I mean, he's a modern day actor. If they were going to show his teeth off, they should have made a little. I don't think they should have bothered, because then they would have had to make his teeth look more period accurate. So they probably just should have left that alone. But then the queen says she needs a couple as well. So the king says, fine, this one and that one, and make sure you get the blonde one, because the king is also not, now he's back. He was briefly a kind of a good guy because he was being called a half breed. He's dark featured. And now, though, he's back to being the white man in charge. So now he'll be demonized just like a light featured white guy. And so he's pointing, let's make sure we get the blonde one, because he's a good rapist too. And of course, no fidelity to his wife, their family. So uh, they keep Olga. She's the blonde one, and her picture comes up here as well. And but the thing with Olga, I'll just mention, there she is right there. She looks like her blonde hair, and you can actually see in the movie, looks like it's bleached blonde rather than naturally blonde, like Kidman appears to be naturally blonde. I don't know, is she? She appears to be naturally blonde. This woman appears that she's naturally maybe dark featured, and then they bleached her hair for it. She tells Olga, that woman I'm talking about right now, tells Amleth, you can see there in that image, and that's him as well. She says, you have the strength to break their bodies. I have the cunning to break their minds. And so that was one of the statements of how females are intellectually, spiritually superior to men. Men are, and maybe morally superior to men. Men are only physically superior to women. But we see now in modern America, modern UK, modern Germany, that they'll even tell you that women are physically superior to men. So then this is where the movie, I mean, if you thought it was slow already, it gets really slow. One good line in the whole movie, and it was tepid as a good line, and they try to revisit it, which was really pathetic. As Amleth is checking out this kingdom, by the way, even though he's a slave, somehow he can sneak around at night. He can leave the farm / kingdom. He can come and go as he pleases just by sneaking around. So if your argument, if you say, oh no, Jason, this was supposed to be realistic, and that's why it was so dark, that's why it was so filthy, that's why it was so grisly, well then account for him sneaking around at night without getting caught as a slave. Account for all of these things that were just purely fantastical. Getting weapons and hiding weapons uh, out of fantastical scenarios as well. But he says, when he finally gets back together with Olga, and he says to her, she said, well, how is it looking? Are you able to accomplish this mission of yours, which he believes is to kill Fjolnir, his uncle, in a lake of fire, and with some kind of a special sword. And he says, Amleth says to Olga, it's a nightmare. And then she says, well, then I suggest you wake up. And then he responds by saying, it's their nightmare. And so that was the only good line in the movie. And they should have just done it once and not tried to revisit it later in the movie. But that was the only good. So if you want to know the good line, there you got it now. One of the nights he sneaks out, he goes to this man witch. Nobody can live in. They tell you repeatedly Iceland is barren. Nobody can live there. It's very hard to come by food. But somehow, an old man with lots of adequate fat on his body lives out in a hole in the ground by himself, and he's like a witch, like a man witch, and presumably that their power is less than the power of female witches, but he's still got some power. He was another one that really needed to be fully clothed. And Amleth goes in there, and he's got some kind of a severed head with him of somebody, and he's crazy. And he has one point where it looked like he was about to, I don't know, orgasm. I have no idea. I mean, it was just gross. This old man that needed more clothes tells Amleth that he's got to go to some mound, and he's got to get this magical sword that can't be chipped, it can't be broken, really. And that comes, the things they're saying there, this is like one of those poorly written short stories where people are learning how to write a short story, and they're like, why do you bother putting that detail or those details in there when it doesn't have any meaning for the story? It doesn't come back and mean anything. So they put all these details about the sword that have nothing to do with the story whatsoever. So nonetheless, they do. Amleth goes to this like burial mound. He descends into it, and this is, even though it's still not great, this is probably the best fight scene in the entire movie. He fights some sort of an oversized Viking in a burial ship, and for this sword, and again with the realism, and he wins, and therefore is able to leave with the sword. And he comes right back into Fjolnir's kingdom, not getting caught. He hides the sword. Oh, he's able to like bark and growl at the big dogs that are their mastiffs, and they just they shriek and run away, really fake and just ridiculous. And he shows to growl. He like shows just his bottom teeth. There's another weird thing, and he hides the sword on the property. Bides his time, and he tells her that I'm just going to be making things go bad for them until I get this opportunity to kill the king in a lake of fire. And I'm telling you, it gets so slow because of this. I'm just trying to make things go wrong in this kingdom. I mean, can you imagine? Yes, it was that painful. So, and the creature underground that he fought for the sword was some sort of like zombie thing. So if that's going to bother you, then maybe the fight won't be cool. But it's some sort of like almost Indiana Jones-ish zombie thing that he does battle with. What is this right here? Oh, note I made to myself. This was the scene that I told you that the woman that I have up here, the chief historian for the movie, the chief historian said she begged the movie maker to include this scene, and then of course he decided to capitulate because he's a coward. And the scene, and she said, this woman here, she said she wanted to explore what being a woman and having period blood during this time frame, how that worked or didn't work for a woman. And that's why she had to beg for this scene to be. How is she exploring it with fiction? I mean, what the really? So the king, Fjolnir, he's every night, the king, and don't think of king, think more of like white men in the country, farmers. Think of that, because that's really what they are. There's no kingdom. It's just like, but they're not farmers. They're the guys who, I guess, own the farms and own the slaves. They're not rich, though. They're filthy, dirty. and they're just swaggering drunkards. And so they get all these like good old boys, they get all drunk, and then every night they go and rape the help. They go and they rape the slaves every night. They have to show this, and they don't actually show the rape scene. They like go into the hut and you can hear like a scream, you know. And so the king does this too. Fjolnir, he goes into the hut and he goes to rape that one right there on the magic window, and Olga, and he's like, "Get up," you know, and it's he stands her up, and he again goes to the blonde hair, the bleached blonde hair, I think, and is conveying to her, okay, now that you're gonna get raped by me. And she raises her gown, and she has on, I guess, cloths around her genitals that are all bloody. And he says doesn't care about the blood or something like this, or she's going to bleed anyhow. And so then she reaches between her legs and grabs a handful, an absolutely handful of blood. How can it be a handful of blood? Well, it's like there's faked tissue in there as well. So it's holding together, grabs this handful of blood, screams, and smashes the blood on the king's face. And then he says, "Oh, you're disgusting." And he steps over to the woman who is in charge of the slaves and says to her, "You better punish her or you both will die." And then he walks off. If you wanted to know what would really happen if you were a slave and you took your period blood and smashed it onto the face of not just the king, but anybody in charge, you would just be dead. No one would do that. They didn't have any power throwing period blood. So somebody call this historian right here, this awful looking bitch, and tell her that you would just get killed. And so therefore no one would do it. And so it was totally unrealistic when the king was just like, well, okay, your period blood has defeated me. And now nothing will happen to you. So just absolutely disgusting, completely out of place, made no sense whatsoever. The power of period blood. I bet you that's going to be the next movie this guy's going to make. That's going to be the title, The Power of Period Blood. Simon says he would have cut your throat. He absolutely would have cut your throat. No one would have done, no slave would have done that, by the way. They would have just, they would take the torturing, the rape, or whatever else. So then, to fill in this like hours of this movie of just drizzling piss slow, they go to this other place where there are folks I guess they know, and they play this game that's kind of like rugby, the slaves, and kind of like rugby, and the king watches, like those in charge, they get to watch and they get to applaud. Okay, good. And they're brutalizing. It's like a cross between like rugby and what's the other, like field hockey? They've got like these sticks, and there's a sphere for the game ball that they play with, and in that scene, the youngest son, the youngest prince of Fjolnir, runs out. He gets to participate for some unknown reason. He gets knocked over, knocked out, and one of the guys, I guess on the opposing team or slaves or whatever it was, didn't know that this was the king's son. He was going to kill him with this club that he had. And if Amleth is playing in the game, he runs over, and the field is like littered with bodies of people knocked out. Just this most bizarre anti-white depiction of what happens when white males are in charge. That's what the whole movie is. You could just write that down. It is the anti-whites' belief and depiction of what the world looks like when white men are in charge. It's total rape, incest, carnage, senseless murdering. Nothing makes sense. Men are just brutal as all hell. They're unthinking. The women are intelligent members of our people, and they're just kind of, when they're not properly respected and deferred to, then they're kind of just tossed around and victimized the entire time. And so even the games are just fields littered with bodies. That's what they're doing here. So Amleth runs over and kills the guy that's about to kill, unknowingly, the youngest prince, and that gets Amleth some. Uh, and it's not a great, cool fight or anything like that. In fact, you don't even get to see him striking the other guy. You get to see a lot of Amleth just like punching, and then more and more blood on his hand and knuckles, and then headbutting, and more blood on his face. And you can hear the sound of like skull cracking and everything. And the king and the queen, they still don't know who he is, uh, even though Gudrun was his mother-in-law so many years later. They then give him the position of what is the position called with the slaves when you have one that is in charge of the other, foreman. And so he's put in charge of the other slaves, and he's of course told that he'll never be a free man because he has the smell of being a slave on him. They then flash to, after that, they tell him that he can have a woman, one of the slaves, to have sex with that night. And there's some sort of weird, like sexualized, like reprobate environment where there is at that night, where there's a big party, and by the way, the youngest prince survives. He was just knocked out. Where there's this bonfire, and again they've got music going, but nobody's got any rhythm. And again, this anti-white's depiction of the white race when we make civilization by ourselves. And so there's this fire going, and people are they're like couples dancing, and there's one at least one couple who are homosexual females, and you can see that they are very into each other. And uh, and some of the people who are out there dancing and poorly are naked, but you can't see anything. So if you're interested in that, just turn on pornography. But then it shows two men naked carry off a third person who's also naked. I did not see whether that third person was female or male, but carry that person off into the woods for sex, presumably. And then Amleth and Olga, they go off into the woods. They have sex, and that's done pretty well. Because if you actually want see actual sex, go watch a pornographic movie. So that's done pretty well. They have a conversation. He like the other men are always like, "So tell me about your earth magic." When they say it over, it's so pathetic. "Please be in charge. Tell me about your earth magic, because I'm just this brute who's meant to just break bones and build houses and then die on cue." Let me see. What else do we have there? She gives, Olga gives a mushroom. I think it was from the Legend of Zelda, actually, a mushroom. And so she has a plan. They have a plan that they're going to give these like hallucinogenic mushrooms or put it in the food. So again, just like vexing the kingdom, giving them bad luck, things like this. Well, one of the other things, so they do that. Although I think that's coming up in a bit. The very next scene is, uh, again, back to the swaggering good old boys, who are the poor and dirty and filthy, but nonetheless they're not slaves. So that's the big difference. So they had all been getting pissed drunk, and it was just these two of them. And then they're back in I guess their kingdom now. They go back to the hut, I guess, where the slave women are, to do their nightly raping of women, because that's what white men do when given the opportunity. Probably when non-white males are not preventing them from rape. And so they go into the hut. Well, at this point, as part of vexing the kingdom, Amleth goes in after them, and he brings his magical sword, and he kills them, and then gruesomely nails their bodies to like the cutting them up, and nails them up on the roof of this thatched roof of this building where they would go rape the women. Of course, and these killings now are scaring the priest, the high like priestess witch of the kingdom, because she says this is some kind of evil magic, and of course it's a female in charge of talking to the gods, and the king and the queen they're freaked out as well. And these two guys were the older prince's best friend, so he's most distraught over this. Like, we raped together, is what he said, and he was upset about that. So they decided, the priestess decided that, well, we've got to have a human sacrifice. So that's the only way to put an end to this unquiet spirit that's doing all this harm to us. So they get a girl, of course. The victim is another female. They tie her up, they gag her. She's on some sort of an altar, and this high priestess is going to execute her. And the high priestess has a helper, a male, and so he's like running around helping her. Well, Amleth says, that's not going to happen on my watch. We're ruining this kingdom. So he goes in, and you get to see the next day what he does. The girl the slave girl who was going to be executed as a human sacrifice, she's released. The priestess she's the one in the bound position, naked, all bound up. And then her helper is hanging upside down over top of her, and his entrails are out of his guts, hanging down on top of her. Of course, he's dead, blood's everywhere. And so the king and the queen, they're distraught by that, as you might imagine. And so they want to do their own magic. It's probably the next night or so that they have everybody on lookout, and that's the night that they give them all the hallucinogenic drugs to make them out of their minds. Some of them kill themselves, like they pull out their knives and they're like stabbing. Other ones are just freaking out from the experience of the drug. And this is the opportunity that Amleth uses to go and talk to his mother, Gudrun, the queen, and I guess the idea was that he was going to say, "I'm here. I've come to save you," and because this was like the only part of the movie that seemed like it was in tune with the actual white man and white race. Don't be looking for glory in this movie. Don't be looking for heroism. Don't be looking for gallantry. You won't find it. If you're a man, there are going to be no tears that well up from the glory. There isn't any. But you had this one thing where it seemed like that one thing was going to be like it was going to survive this movie, that he was going to come back and save his mother from her husband having been killed. She believed her son having been killed as well by the uncle, now forced to be raped by the uncle, forced to bear the uncle's children, and imprisoned by him, and so as his queen. And so this was the one like manly white thing. He was going to come back and he was going to save his mother from this. Well, stop listening right now if you don't want to hear the twist, because these anti-white pieces of shit undid that as well. And they did it in a way to, of course, demonize the fairest of white people as they could. And so he goes in, he comes upon his mother while everybody's going mad, and he says, I'm your son. I'm Amleth. I survived. She's like, you didn't die? And he said, no, I survived. I escaped, and I've been on the run, with this band of raping and pillaging and everything my whole life. And now I've come to kill uh, Fjolnir, my uncle, your husband, now that was forced upon you, and I've come to save you from all of this. That was my oath, my lifelong oath, and I'm here to do it now. And then she says, "You're as dumb as your father was, because I planned this whole thing. I begged your uncle to kill your father because he was this awful POS who all he did was rape women." Now, remember, this is the light featured king from earlier in the movie, Orvindil. All he did was rape women. All he did was pillage lands. All he did was steal from other people's hard work. And so I begged him to kill. Uh, I begged Fjolnir, your uncle, to kill my husband Arvindil, and to kill you too, my son, so that we wouldn't have any problem with you in the future. And yet here you show up. And so she begged and this is the dark featured man now, Fjolnir, that she really wanted to be with. And again, you have more mean pathogens there about demonizing the white race as a whole. Remember, when it always comes down to dark featured white person, light featured white person, and they're going to pit them against each other, anti-whites, they always go with the demonization of the lighter feature in the contest. So you could technically have two dark featured if they couldn't get any light featured actors to do the job. But the one of the two dark featured ones that was lighter featured, they would make the bad guy. And so, and also the one that our women would not choose. This just is the way as anti-whiteism works. So he can't believe this, right? And he doesn't kill her, and that's another thing. He leaves. She said, oh, and let me tell you, he doesn't kill her, as though she didn't deserve death. Then, I mean, if she was actually behind. Oh, he said, I heard you screaming when they carried you off, and she said, you idiot! I was laughing when they carried me off because it was finally done. So anyhow, she says, he had said, I'm here to kill the or I think he said he'd leave the prince. No, he did say he'd leave the princes alive. Her two other sons with this man. But she said, no, if you're going to kill the king, you must kill my sons as well. And then you will marry me and I will be your queen. And then she grabs him and starts French kissing him. I shit you not. This is what white women do. Don't you know? According to anti-whites, it's just total incest with the son. And just go ahead and kill off the guy I'm with now and kill off the two sons. And then you and I will be king and queen. And so he pushes her away, doesn't kill her. He flees. He goes back to Olga and he says, I can't kill. I can never kill a woman, no matter what she's doing to me, no matter what she has done to me. I cannot harm a woman. Another mean pathogen for white males. The heroic, the noble thing to do is no matter how evil a white woman, you must submit. You must, no matter how, in our case, our real world life, no matter how anti-white she is, you must submit. You cannot retaliate. So he doesn't kill her, but he does kill the oldest son at that moment, and the kid, the 20-year-old or whatever he is sleeping, and he just runs his sword through the sleeping son. There's then a big ceremony. I'll wrap it up now. We're getting very near the end. There's a big ceremony for the dead son, and at the big ceremony, they sacrifice one of the slave women. They just kill her and include her body in his burial mound. They kill a horse. They chop the shit out of its head. The youngest son does this to get it to get it off of the horse. And of course, now Amleth has to flee the the kingdom, if you will, the farmstead, which is really what it is, because I guess the gig is up. They know jig is up, and so he decides that he's got to leave. Olga says, "Take me with you." He says, "No, she's got to stay. She's got to be on the inside." And he's going to attack from the outside or something. And when the time comes to attack from the outside, it is the most pathetic fight you have ever seen. He comes like striding down the hill with the sword that he's supposed to kill the uncle with. And the king is out there, and the king sends Fjolnir, the king, sends 3 soldiers up to fight him. And he can't use the sword on them for some reason, because the sword is only supposed to be for killing Fjolnir, the king, in a lake of fire, but he used the sword to kill the son the night before. Anyhow, he can't use it, so he uses it instead as kind of like a club on them with the scabbard still on it, the sheath still on it, and he knocks them down. And you think it's going to be maybe like one of those hero comes to save the day. He'll fight these 3 off, no problem, and then he'll have it out with the chief bad guy, the antagonist. No, he fights these guys. He knocks them down, knocks them out. But they come to, and as he's continuing to fight them, he sees Olga, and I don't know. I guess I do know why. They have him conclude for some reason that she is, instead of staying in the kingdom, that she's running off. They show her running, but when I saw that happen, I thought, okay, she's running back to her hut or whatever to get away from the violence and the possibility of death. But for some reason, that takes his attention long enough that he can get knocked out. And then the 3 men, none of them dead, they've captured him. They take his sword. They put him in, at the king's bidding, in a building. They hang him up with his hands above his head. And for some reason, they leave the sword in there. I mean, it was as bad as you can think about. If you want to know the fight scenes, what they were like, look at the old Batman television show. That's what the fight scenes are like. I mean, they might as well have written "pow, bam, whammy" on the screen like the old Batman show. But when they had him hanging from his arms in this, and then leaving his weapon behind with him, I mean, that was like so many of the old TV series, and where the chief bad guy always leaves the things the good guy needs. It's just pathetic. And he didn't even look like he was hanging from, and surely he's muscular. He could have held himself up by whatever they had, and then it would have looked real, his hanging. Instead, you can very easily tell that he has a harness holding him up, that his weight is not on his wrists and hands, but it's on some kind of harness that they've erased from the scene, which of course is totally dark. So maybe they didn't even have to do much erasing. And then they beat him a little bit because they want to know where he put the eldest son's heart after he killed him, even though they didn't show him. They just showed the sword go through. But he took the heart, and I immediately figured out, they're doing this so that he can be saved. And so of course he is saved. And it seemed like some sort of a connection between Olga and the magical powers and Odin, who sends ravens, and they land in the barn, and the ravens somehow unlatch him. He falls, and then Olga, and this is a sizable man. I don't know how much he weighs, 200 plus pounds. Olga is quite small, but supposedly she dragged his body and his sword to some hiding place where there's a hot bath, a hot spring, and she's put him in it. He sort of comes to, and it is like they mix in James Bond. It's so ridiculous. This little woman dragged this big man, couldn't drag him 2 feet, much less, and that's over like a basketball court. She couldn't drag him 6 inches over that rough terrain, but of course she did. And so, yeah, it's girl power, exactly. And so he comes to, and she says, "Okay, come away with me now. Let's flee." And then he says, "Well, I might as well do that because and by the way, you get the real impression over the course of the film, certainly halfway through to the rest of the film, that there is no good guy, that they're all bad. Everybody's an antagonist. No one is good in this film. Every single person is evil for evil's sake. That's it. There's no glory. There's no heroism. There's no noble cause. It's just killing and raping, and somebody killed somebody I cared about, so I will kill them too. There's no glory in this. There's no great mission. So don't go looking for that either. As though, people who would defend this, I can hear them now saying, "Well, that's the real world." Bullshit. We have a grand cause in going free. And if we didn't succeed in recapturing our destiny with Go Free, anti-whites in the distant future, they would portray what we had done as without heroism, without glory, without it, all just this totally selfish desire of individuals. It's despicable. No greater cause. This is not what the white race is. It's not what the white race ever was. And anybody who in the white sympathetic sphere wants to say, well, this is some sort of a greater depiction of what and who we really are or something, is an anti-white, and you should reject them moving forward. So, and the woman, by the way, just another recollection, the woman they kill that goes in the burial mound, she had to sing first for the slain eldest prince, and she was naked, and then she knew she was going to be murdered as part of the burial. So he decides, well, I might as well not continue to try to kill Fjolnir, since it was my mother. I can't save her because she wants this. And so I might as well just run off with you, Olga. And so magically, a boat turns up in Iceland for them to board. And somehow they trick, like there's a regular, like, trains running. I guess Mussolini was maybe in charge, and the boats were on time. That was so ridiculous. So the boat shows up, and the guy's like, well, I'm going to have to charge you X, Y, or Z. Maybe it was the Uber of that time. And so they get on the boat, and she, of course, because she's so smart, Olga convinces the guy that, the king and his men, they went on another ship and with another Uber. And so you're just taking us two. And it's like a 21-day journey or something, the guy says. That's one hell of a dedicated Uber driver. And so they get on the boat, and they're sailing now. And then Amleth has doubts about what he's doing. And as he's with her, he has a vision. Like he notices that her neck's got a scratch, and then he has a vision that she's pregnant. She admits to him that she is. He foresees that it's two. They show that tree again, the tree of life, and there you have a son hanging side by side. It looks like a male child and a female child. And the female child, remember all the way back at the beginning, Maiden King. The female child is the one in what looks like the garb of a king and with a sword in front of her. And so he tells Olga, "This is my vision," and now we have this great line and this great connection that can never be broken. But I also have my hate. I'm not shitting you. He says that he has his hate. And he says, and again, this might be a slight paraphrase, "Hate is all I have ever known," he says. Hate is all I have ever known. Taking one of the mean pathogens, hate, anti-white slurs, right out of the pages, throw it right into this movie. Hate is all I have never known. And he says, "I wish I could be free of it." And so she says, Olga says, but you can be free of it. Instead, come with us and we can live out our lives as a happy family and everything. And of course, since he's a white man, he can't do that because hate is all he is. I mean, can you seriously believe this? Hate is all he is. Hate is all I've ever known. I wish I could be free of it. So she says, you can choose this new destiny to be with me and the babies. And then he tells her, I choose both. I choose the new destiny with you and the babies, and I choose hate. I'm not kidding. Well, how is he going to do that? Well, the way he's chosen to be with Olga and the babies is because he's impregnated her. And so now he will beget the Maiden King. And he will also jump into the ocean and swim his big, heavy ass all the way back to Iceland. And that's what he does. So that he can go and kill his mother, his half-brother, this 9-year-old boy, and his uncle. So he swims back, and when he gets back to the island, he goes to back to the kingdom. There's not much left of it now from all the havoc that he and Olga have been wreaking on it. And he breaks into the queen's chambers, and she immediately attacks him with a sword. She slashes him up a couple times because even though women are weaker than men, and women with penises always destroy other women who were not born with penises in competition, intellectual competitions, physical competitions, etc. Even though that's the case, she comes out and she can really wield a sword well, and she gets a couple real good slashes on him, cuts him up, and he kills her almost accidentally. Because remember, the message to white men: you can never be angry with a woman. You cannot avenge yourself. You can nothing. You have to just submit to their rule and them victimizing you. He accidentally kills her, but she thanks him because his sword goes through her heart. And for some, I guess that she dies quickly. She's happy about that. Then his half brother, this like 9-year-old, jumps on his back with a dagger and just working on him from behind with this dagger. And he throws the kid off. And when he does, his sword accidentally like slashes his guts out. And of course, he dies then. The Fjolnir steps in and sees this mess. His sword is drawn. He sheathes his sword. He picks up the boy. He grabs the woman, the queen, and drags her along the ground. He says to Fjolnir, I will meet you at the gates of hell tomorrow. And Fjolnir says, I'll meet you at the gates of hell. And so the next day, Fjolnir comes upon the queen and the son and a horse with his head chopped off, and they're lying there dead. He walks over. I don't know. They should not have bothered that. There were a lot of scenes that really could have been cut out. He says whatever he says to them, and then Fjolnir shows up, and there are again back to the fanciful, like rivulets of lava, and of course, if you know, you can't be close to lava, and naked, nearly. They're both nearly naked. And so they have a sword fight again. Don't look for some sort of great choreography between these two. There isn't. And Amleth is almost defeated. He goes down on his knees. Fjolnir is in the point where he could cut his head off, but he hasn't yet. And then he has really injured him all over, like big gashes through muscle that would really make it hard to wield a sword. And not impossible. And at that point, Amleth starts just like yelling, it's just crazy. And then the Fjolnir starts yelling back at him, and he yells some more, and then he yells some more, and then finally he stands up, and they start swinging swords at each other again, really just poorly done, and then simultaneously they kill each other. So simultaneously, Fjolnir runs his sword through the chest of Amleth, and Amleth swipes the head off the shoulders. There's so much decapitation. It's almost as if the movie maker wanted to somehow convince the white population that decapitation comes from white people. All the decapitating you see happening today in Central America, particularly Mexico, and in the Middle East, that originated with white people. They just love cutting heads off. And so then he falls to the ground, and as he's dying, as I say, his eyes might uh, tear up a little bit, and then that might be like harkening back to him being told never to cry again. But he then sees in his mind's eye, Olga, and she has these two very healthy babies, and I guess it's her voice or that her saying, um, "We can never be apart now because we're tied together forever." I guess by way of these babies, and she says, "Now uh, take your uh, not mission or something like this um, journey, go on your journey." And then it flashes to this scene of the Valkyrie. You don't see him, but you see this Valkyrie galloping on a horse up toward a hole in the clouds. The one that I've showed you that had the really poor teeth, and they put fortunately got braces for it, got braces for her. And that's it. And his eyes close, and that's the end of the movie. That's the totality of the Northman. The the writing is awful. The acting is awful. I mean, bad. The costumes look maybe tiny bit better than Renaissance Festival costumes. The scenery, with the exception of a couple of different scenes, very even in almost all of the scenes convey ugliness, convey filth, convey squalor. There isn't like there aren't any wonderful scenes of the landscape. It's as though Iceland and Northern Europe doesn't have a pretty place at all. It's all just hideous. And I'm talking about even nature. None of it is nice, and it's always dark apparently too. There's never any crisp sun. There's always rape. There's always incest. There's always just the most violent. There aren't any moments of tenderness. There aren't any moments, fleeting moments, very very fleeting. And in those moments, they're plotting violence. So I would not recommend. And I know there are things that I'm missing, but we're all the way to 4:30 on the East Coast. I'll take a look at what you all said, and if you had anything to say at all. 0022, great to see you. You should do more movie reviews. Thank you. I appreciate it. Bass guitar says, moral of the story, Hollywood isn't history. The MC. Well said, brother. Well said. If you tag me as No White Guilt, I will speak to your question or comment. Otherwise, I'm out of here. And I hope you all appreciate it, and I hope you all share it so that some more can be addressed than a typical movie review. I mean, we can say, if it were your uncle that killed your father, wouldn't you be that mad? Well, sure. And then stole your mother, sure. So make sure you tag me, or I will probably miss what you have written. The movie The Vikings from 1958 is also anti-white. The villain is blonde, the hero is a dark-haired slave, and Native European rebellion is portrayed as evil. What a surprise, right? So there were a lot of people that were really interested in this, and I'm sure this is going to come as a very upsetting to pagans who are white sympathetic and white positive. But this is, what do you expect? You really expect much more? Horseradish Power says the sword can only be unsheathed at night. Well, when he killed his brother, it was nighttime. His half brother. While his half brother was sleeping. That was in the middle of the night, uh, and so that's true. It was unsheathed then. And when he came down to fight the three soldiers, it was dusk or nearly night, but the movie was so dark that it's hard to say when day was. But thank you for sharing that. I guess part of the original story. Elaine Sabatino says, I listened to Tap on the replay and will listen to your review when I get home. See you Sunday. I'll see you Sunday. I see our dear little ladybug is with us. Hello to you. Kingdom of Vinland says, and to think I was looking forward to this garbage. Yeah, regrettably. I mean, even if it didn't have all the anti-white garbage in it, you're still going to have to put up with terrible acting, god-awful acting, god-awful swordplay, costumes bad. I mean, it's just so much of it was horrible. Of course, Radish Kara says, thanks. You put into context all what I was seeing wrong. Well, good. Thank you for saying that. And please do share. Rory says, Marmothian hails to you, sir, and to you as well. 0022 says, people who aren't going free aren't capable of doing proper movie reviews. If you watch any movie review channel, you'll see what I mean. Yeah, I mean, you're going to see, what you'll see is, they'll say, well, why do you think that Amleth waited until he could return as a slave? Waited until, was it just a matter of opportunity for him? Did he, and maybe, I mean, maybe I need to start off reviews this way and to hook people who otherwise might not have heard about going free before. So why did he wait? Of course, we would say that's what the screenplay and script said, but why did he wait? Well, if it were true, maybe he waited because there weren't enough opportunities, or he was still troubled about his mission, or he was trying to run away from his past, or he was, or he had forgotten his oaths, or he thought his vengeance was supposed to take place at a certain hour and in a certain place, and those things hadn't come together yet. Why did Olga let him go back by himself instead of jumping in the water and outswimming him back to Iceland? Well, because she knew that he was. By the way, she calls up like some sort of wind to carry the ship even faster away. Well, because she knew that she had to leave with the babies that were in her womb so that she could be the one who gives birth to the maiden king to come, which I'm sure will be the best king. And then you'll finally have peace and tranquility, and she'll just be spending out her days fighting off men and their evil, their patriarchy. She'll put things to right by also importing shit tons of non-white males, because of course we all know, according to the anti-white narrative, that white women, the reason they don't have non-white mates is because they just haven't been not enough imported yet. Double zero double two, which I'm sure you can already guess though. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm doing some of it. I guess I can make fun of some of the other in a way. Doesn't it sound so silly to contemplate why these characters would or didn't do or motivated them? What might you feel upon seeing your father murdered by your brother and his helpers? How might you feel if your mother said, "No, I wanted your father dead"? By the way, you can see that at that point that it was the lightest featured person in the movie was the most evil, the lightest featured one. I think she has blue eyes, blonde hair, and she is by far the most evil. Willing to have incest with her son, so that and did start French kissing him so that they can be king and queen. Kill off my sons, I don't care. Kill my husband, I don't care. And she had done that already once in the past. She was ready to do that again. Now, what would drive her to that kind of evil? I can come up with. Do you all want to? I mean, we can chat for the next maybe 15 minutes or not. Come up with the most outlandish who, what, why, when, where, how for all of these characters. I mean, 002 is really hitting the nail on the head with what they do elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, she was the most evil in the movie, and by the very end, Fjolnir, the dark-featured uncle, was a sympathetic, really sympathetic character, because his wife, whom he, according to Gudrun, the queen, the wife, the purest of evil, blonde hair, blue eyes, like fair skin, she had begged him on her knees to do all of this. He didn't want to do it. And she said that he actually loved her. So she was unfaithful to the king, sleeping around with the uncle, unfaithful to the king and her husband. And that Fjolnir actually loved her. That he really loved her, whereas the king was just a rapist and thief. And so this guy who actually loved his wife, and he didn't care about her past either. And her past was that she had originally been taken as a slave, and apparently the king, Orvindil, would remind her of that she was a slave. So Fjolnir, the dark-featured guy, didn't care about her past. He actually loved her. He loved his boys, and then he had to watch them all get murdered by this psycho who came out of nowhere, and should have been dead by the will of his mother, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, rather than the will of the dark-featured uncle. So there's that. But what might drive Gudrun to these sorts of extremes? What might have happened in her past to make her so vicious and shallow? I wonder. Maybe it was the harshness of the times. Maybe it was when she was taken for chattel when she was very young, and maybe she saw her parents murdered by the Viking slavers, and so she had become just this, forced by white males to become this evil in her life, and she just wanted to get revenge on the people around her, their relatives that had done this to her, because she's a victim. I mean, what else? What other parts would you want to, fantasize about why characters in a movie might do something? I'm really going to have to. I apologize, folks. I'm really going to have to work at trying to fake that talking about why characters may have done things. We have Western Regenerate over here on D Live has written, have you seen the previous two films directed by Robert Eggers? I think they were both quite polarizing. I have not seen them. But if they're anything like this, and as poor as the movie is done, then this is if you are a pagan, let me just remind you, if you just you're a Christian or atheist, and you take pride in our pre-Christian history as well as our Christian history, or excluding the Christian history, which, by the way, they reference in the movie in a really disgusting way, too. They say that when Amleth mutilates and then hangs the mutilated corpses up on the roof of the hut where they go and rape, one of the soldiers of King Fjolnir asks another, "Do you think this is the Christian, the doing of the Christian God? Their their God is a corpse that hangs from a tree." And then they say, "No, this is no work of them. This is an unquiet spirit or something of this nature." We have Western Bizmaker says, check out a channel called Horrible Reviews. His review of the anti-white movie called, is that Hostile? Uh, his understanding of criticism about the Westman, no, about the movie falsely portraying Western kind, and his review, rationalization of why they chose Western civilization to be the dangerous place run by Westman. I have not seen it, but maybe I'll check that out, and thank you for that. Let me come over here to Odyssey and see if we can have anything. Anybody tag me? Doesn't look like it. No, doesn't look like it. But hello to everybody over there. Okay. I'll take another look here, and then we're going to wrap it up. It was good hanging out with you all. Please tell folks about this review and how valuable it is, especially compared to others, because it's going to be irritating if we have like 1/50th the views of others who won't provide anything of value, who will say, what do you think prompted Gudrun to be the? Don't you think she was manipulated by? Wasn't she lying when she told her son that that she had planned it all? Wasn't that just a way to psychologically accept her circumstance, that she could never escape this prison with this man, with this uncle, and so she had come to love being there, and this was her story that she had told herself, and she had come to believe. I mean, that kind of musing is totally valueless. But and that's why I should say that's why we should let folks know about our reviews. Horseradish Power says this was about perverting Arthurian legend and the mythic hero. It absolutely was. And you can see in other articles about this movie, anti-whites are well aware of that. That they go and, like I was talking about that when I was reading that first article, the guy was saying that there's nothing glorious about European history. These are the lies of heroism and etc. Those are, or the statements of those, the legends of those things are just as fictional as the magical entities in those stories. So that just shows you that anti-whites, they lack the ability to understand glory, irrespective of race. They lack the ability to understand glory, gallantry, nobility. They lack it. They can't see it. So since it's void in them, they're unable to see it in anybody else. So this is, folks, the bottom line is, this is what anti-whites, this movie, The Northman, this is what anti-whites see of a world that is influenced in all cases and dominated in some cases by white males. This is what the world looks like, according to the anti-whites, when white men are either in charge or everywhere or nearly so. And it is absolutely a despicable view into their hearts. As I see that we are blank on Cash App and we are blank on Entropy. So I will say to you all, it's been a wonderful time together, and I bid you all a